It's truly remarkable how quickly a society can react to a tragedy. There's this immediate visceral surge of emotion, a desperate desire for action, for safety. But if you look closely enough, those reactions, especially the official ones, they can sometimes reveal deeper patterns at play. Today, we've got some truly fascinating sources that really pull back the curtain on just that.
Exactly. We're not just going to skim the surface. Our goal is to connect some very different, but ultimately, interconnected dots for you.
Absolutely. For this deep dive, we've brought in some powerful material. We're going to be drawing heavily from a recent Dutch YouTube video, Bergsma and Bennink #8, which critically examines the tragic case of a young girl named Lisa.
Right. And this event sparked immediate public and political outrage, but our sources delve into the nature of that outrage. It wasn't straightforward.
No, it wasn't. Then we're going to weave in surprising insights from C.S. Lewis's brilliant satirical work, The Screwtape Letters. It's almost like a diabolical playbook on human temptation and control.
A classic and eerily relevant.
And finally, we'll connect these threads to a series of news reports and discussions around digital control, the role of journalism, and the ever-expanding influence of the state.
So our mission today is to understand how societal anxieties, moral outrage, tragic events, how they can be leveraged. We'll explore how these moments can be used to advance specific agendas, often leading to increased state control, division, and a subtle erosion of individual freedoms.
All under the banner of protection.
Exactly. All under what our sources describe as this appealing guise of protection. It's about helping you see the why behind what often feels like an overwhelming flood of information.
That's quite a claim, that protection is just a guise. But for an audience keen on critical thinking, how do our sources ensure they're not just being cynical? How do they show it's a real pattern?
Well, they build the case piece by piece. Let's start with the specifics.
Okay. Let's dive into the specifics, though, starting with the heartbreaking case of Lisa. She was a 17-year-old girl tragically murdered. And of course, this kind of event stirs deep emotions in everyone. That immediate, understandable desire for action, for justice, for safety.
Absolutely. But what our YouTube source highlights are some truly unusual reactions and concerns from observers that start to paint a different picture.
Unusual how?
Well, what stood out immediately to the host of that YouTube show was the striking lack of basic information about Lisa, the victim, and even the alleged perpetrator. Things like photos, initials, or names details that in previous high-profile cases like Anne Faber or Marianne Vostra would have been widely disseminated almost immediately.
Right, almost standard practice, you'd think. So the lack of that felt off.
Yeah, exactly. It felt to them remarkably unusual and raised questions about transparency, like what was being held back.
And the official response was the very first thing authorities focused on.
This is key. The first reaction from authorities wasn't primarily about finding the murderer or even expressing condolences in a typical way. It was about placing more cameras.
Oh, cameras. Straight away.
Straight away, which the YouTube hosts deemed completely inappropriate given the context and timing. It seemed jarring.
It really makes you pause, suggesting perhaps a different priority. But is there any counter-argument in our sources or another perspective before we accept it was inappropriate?
The sources we're looking at are quite critical here. They focus on the timing and the nature of that response. They also note other anomalies, like a journalist from The Telegraph claiming she was pursued from the Amstel Hotel.
The Amstel Hotel.
Yeah.
How far is that from the scene?
A good 23 minutes away. The YouTube hosts found this claim unlikely, questioning the credibility and just how quickly certain narratives seem to be forming and spreading.
It's almost as if the narrative was being shaped with a particular intention, maybe even before all the facts were clear. And then, right on the heels of this tragedy, with striking speed and coordination, this campaign called Wij eisen de nacht op, We Claim the Night, was launched.
Launched is putting it mildly. It exploded.
This wasn't just some grassroots thing, was it? Our sources make it clear this was immediate, and it was everywhere.
No, not at all grassroots in the usual sense. It was remarkably coordinated. We're talking about an instant poem appearing online, huge billboard campaigns literally overnight.
Billboards, overnight.
Yeah, Wij zijn de nacht ook plastered everywhere. A full-blown PR strategy, rapid political engagement from major figures, Frans Timmerman, Femke Halsema, Rob Jetten, all jumping in.
Wow, so high-level political buy-in immediately.
Absolutely. This story wasn't just in the news, it was front-page news, even in the AD, a major newspaper.
And the money. There was a GoFundMe, right?
Yes, and the financial aspect is also quite telling. A GoFundMe started by Danique de Jong, who's a campaign strategist for G+O, that's a prominent Dutch communications agency. Initially, the goal was pretty modest, maybe 12,000 to 15,000.
Okay, reasonable for, say, victim support or something.
But incredibly, it quickly escalated, skyrocketed really, to 530,000.
€500,000. For what?
The stated purpose was awareness and dialogue. And the originator of the campaign text and hashtag, Nink Schraven, made of RTL, framed it around women's perpetual need for caution and feelings of sadness and anger. Valid feelings, of course, but the campaign structure was notable.
So on the surface, it's about grief, about safety. But let's dig into our sources' analysis of the underlying message. This is where it gets really interesting. They argue that while presented as being about safety, it's interpreted as a power grab, or wie eisen de Macht op. What exactly do they mean by that?
Well, the sources argue that instead of focusing on the specific perpetrator, and remember, it was revealed by the Public Prosecution Service, the OM, that he was an alleged illegal asylum seeker with a history of 2 previous assaults.
Right, that detail came out.
Instead of dealing with that, the blame was immediately deflected onto a broader group, all men, or the patriarchy. This, they argue, sidestepped individual accountability, and crucially, any discussion about the potential implications of existing policies regarding asylum or prior offenses.
That's a crucial observation. So rather than addressing a specific crime or even a specific kind of criminal behavior, the campaign broadened the scope massively.
Yeah.
And what about the demands? Were they about, say, stricter policing for violent offenders or maybe better support systems or something else?
The critique of the demands is quite strong in our sources. They argue that rather than addressing root causes or individual accountability, the campaign implicitly called for increased state control.
State control how? Like more police.
Well, yes, but framed in a specific way. It manifests in visions of what our sources see as a sort of distorted version of 15-minute cities. You know, that concept initially about local amenities. Here it was reframed into one of brightly lit streets and police on every corner, implying omnipresent surveillance.
So safety through being watched constantly.
Essentially, the underlying demand, as interpreted by the sources, was for women to be seen by cameras rather than addressing the actual source of the threat.
And this neatly ties into existing agendas that our sources highlight, doesn't it?
Exactly. The YouTube hosts connect it directly to ongoing government campaigns against femicide, the STG agenda for gender equality, which are specific international guidelines. Our sources trace back to various global initiatives and what they bluntly call the woke industry that constantly seeks outrage and the dismantling of patriarchy.
They even coined a phrase for it, which I find incredibly sticky. The club sandwich of Satan.
It's an unforgettable image, isn't it?
It really is. What does it mean?
The club sandwich of Satan is their term for a strategy using layers of division, men versus women, secular versus Muslim, you name it, alongside calls for more surveillance, more cameras, more lights. The goal, they argue, is to keep society in a state of low energy and fear, because fearful, divided people are easier to control.
And they give examples of this thinking.
Yeah, they cited Eva James from NS, the public broadcaster, suggesting redesigning public spaces through the eyes of women. The implication being that male architects are somehow to blame for current feelings of unsafety, which again deflects from the actual perpetrators of violence.
It's a very specific reframing of the problem indeed. Okay, so that's the campaign and its alleged underlying message. But speaking of the state, we need to look at its role in these emerging control mechanisms more directly. Our sources critique official responses like Martin Kohlsloot from Radio 1, advising against discussing the perpetrator's background to avoid political exploitation.
Right, even though the Public Prosecution Service had already released information about the individual's illegal status and history.
So why advise silence after the information is out? What's the implication here, according to the sources?
This is framed by our sources as a clear attempt to avoid accountability for policy consequences. By shutting down discussion about the perpetrator's background, you conveniently avoid scrutinizing the policies that might have led to that individual being in the country illegally, especially with a history of prior assaults. It's about controlling the narrative, pure and simple.
Protecting the policy, not necessarily the public.
That's the interpretation.
And the legislative implications stemming from this climate are significant. The discussion highlights a looming law, or proposed law, allowing women to request men's criminal records for dating purposes. On the surface, it sounds like an attempt at protection, sure, but what are the broader consequences our sources point to?
They argue this path leads towards a society of suspicion, a place where no one gets a second chance, potentially. and where personal data, maybe even minor past offenses, can be weaponized against individuals far into the future, creating what they call a permanent dossier.
A dossier.
Yeah, imagine the chilling effect on, say, honest disclosure, or even on people seeking help for past mistakes, if that information can just be pulled up and used against you in any social interaction, any date.
That idea of a dossier for life, where your past can just be instantly weaponized, it really makes you think about privacy, especially online privacy, in a totally new way, doesn't it? It's not just about targeted ads anymore.
Not at all.
And as we connect these dots, what truly resonates, and frankly, what I found incredibly illuminating in preparing for this deep dive, is how closely some of these modern manipulations mirror a satirical playbook written decades ago. C.S. Lewis in the Screwtape Letters.
Ah, yes, Lewis's classic. For those unfamiliar, it's brilliant satire. Screwtape, he's an adjunct department secretary of hell, basically a senior demon, instructing his nephew, Wormwood, a junior tempter, on how to subtly lead humans astray.
A diabolical playbook, literally.
It really is, and its insights into human nature and temptation are just, well, they're eerily relevant today, aren't they?
Uncannily so. And Lewis's core insight in this work is profound. The ultimate goal of these demons, these tempters, is to keep people in fear, in low energy, constantly distracted from truth or any higher purpose. They aim to foster division and polarization, all to weaken humans spiritually, making us easy targets for manipulation. It's a direct echo of that club sandwich of Satan idea, isn't it?
Absolutely. The parallels are stark. And Lewis also highlights how demons thrive on jargon over reason. He notes they succeed by building on jargon, not reason, deliberately keeping humans out of the clear opposition between true and false.
Jargon over reason.
Think about it. This perfectly echoes our earlier discussion about political language. Terms like the CDA's decency or the VVD's liberal, which, as our sources suggest, can often feel like empty terms devoid of real substance, or even the disregard for facts we saw during the COVID era. When the words lose their clear meaning, rational debate becomes almost impossible.
That's a crucial observation. When the language itself becomes a fog, it's harder to see the truth clearly. And this point is critical. Lewis, in chapter 26, describes a democratic spirit in a diabolical sense. He says it champions a false equality. His example is almost like saying a poodle is just as good as a St. Bernard. What does he mean by that, and how does it connect to what we've seen?
He argues this false kind of equality, this insistence that everyone is the same in every way, leads to a society of underdeveloped individuals, people who are full of the kind of self-wisdom that comes from flattery, as he puts it. These individuals then react very poorly to any criticism, any suggestion of difference or hierarchy, because their mantra is, I am nothing less than you.
And the consequence.
The consequence, Lewis warns, is a land without great men where envy and resentment flourish. It's the spirit of, I'm as good as you, twisted into, you're no better than me. And the devil's ultimate aim, Lewis states quite clearly, is not primarily to destroy countries, but the destruction of individuals through fear, betrayal, hate, anger, and despair, weakening the individual soul.
And when you connect that back to the Lisa case, you can see how the campaigns push for a state-mandated equality and safety, rather than focusing on individual responsibility or a deeper understanding of good and evil, aligns with Lewis's diabolical view of democracy. It's not about making everyone truly equal in capability or opportunity, maybe, but about leveling down to a lowest common denominator, making everyone resent any form of excellence or individual difference. That's a chilling parallel.
It really is. And this pursuit of control, often fueled by these narratives of protection, doesn't stop with public campaigns or political rhetoric. Our sources highlight a particularly concerning expansion into the digital realm, starting with a pretty striking claim about online content.
Exactly. Moving on, let's talk about digital control. We saw a fascinating and frankly concerning discussion sparked by Ben Vanderberg. He's an IT expert, former skater.
Right, on the WNL program.
Yeah. He claimed that Twitter, now X, was full of child pornography, a very strong claim. But our sources immediately challenged this. They found it unsubstantiated, pointing to Elon Musk's own strict policies against such content and, frankly, their own lack of encounters with it on X. It makes you wonder, why make such a bold, seemingly unverified statement on national television? What was the deeper play here?
Well, the YouTube hosts did some digging. They uncovered what they believe is the underlying agenda. Vanderberg cited a study by an organization called Alliance for Europe. Now, they noted this group is funded by the EU.
EU funded, okay.
And crucially, this organization had recently shifted its focus. It used to be about Russia, but now it's focused on the Digital Services Act, the DSA, that massive piece of EU legislation regulating online platforms.
The DSA again.
Exactly. So this is presented by our sources as potentially instigated work. Research or claims designed specifically to create a narrative that supports tighter digital regulation under the DSA.
So create the problem or exaggerate it to justify the solution you already want.
That's the suspicion raised by the sources.
Okay, so under this banner of protecting children, what are these new rules, specifically the Digital Services Act, actually requiring? And what are the implications for us, for you listening?
Under the DSA, these regulations are moving towards requiring online identification for a whole range of sites. It's not just obvious things like buying alcohol or accessing gambling sites anymore. We're talking potentially about sites for mental health support, sex education, maybe even anonymous commenting on news sites.
Wow, so anonymity online could really disappear.
That's the direction of travel. And this leads to what our sources call the ultimate control. It means massive data collection, the potential elimination of anonymity, and the creation of this digital net. A net where people might become afraid to seek help or express certain opinions, feeling their dossier, or there's that word again, could be used against them by future laws or future governments, or even just algorithms.
It's a direct echo of the COVID era, isn't it? That pervasive feeling of state do something, which led so many people to willingly give up freedoms for perceived safety.
It really is. Our sources drew that direct parallel. People lining up with helmets and face masks 1.5 meters apart, heading for another shot. It illustrates how easily fear can be leveraged for control and how willingly people can accept measures presented as protection without always seeing the long-term cost.
A powerful and disquieting parallel indeed. And this theme of protection leading to control extends directly into the world of journalism. You'd think that's the one area where freedom would be most fiercely guarded.
You would hope so.
Right. Our sources bring up a debate the host of their show had with Thomas Bruning. He's from the Nederlands Vereniging voor Journalisten, the NVJ, the Dutch Association of Journalists. It was about a new EU law. Now, this law ostensibly aims to protect journalists. Sounds good, right?
On the surface, yes.
But our sources revealed a critical, pretty alarming detail. It also allows the EU to wiretap journalists in the general interest of the EU.
Wiretap journalists, the people it's supposed to protect.
Exactly. That sounds like a complete contradiction in terms, doesn't it?
Yeah.
How could protection come with such an invasive caveat?
It points to a massive conflict of interest, as our sources highlight, especially when you factor in the money. The EU provides billions in funding to major Dutch media companies, like DPG Media, which owns many big newspapers and online outlets.
Billions in funding and the power to wiretap. That raises serious questions about journalistic independence, surely.
Absolutely. But the NVJ representative, Thomas Bruning, according to our sources, seemed to overlook this connection. It led the YouTube hosts to invoke that old saying, whose bread one eats, whose word one speaks.
So it's not just about a technical loophole. It's about the potential for subtle or not so subtle influence on the press itself. And Bruning is characterized in the source as, well, maybe naive, or perhaps stuck in jargon, seemingly unable to see how EU funding and these new rules could constitute political influence and an erosion of real press freedom.
Apparently, he argued that EU money guarantees freedom, which, in light of these wiretapping clauses specifically, seems, well, it highlights a concerning blind spot, according to the critique.
A very concerning blind spot when discussing journalistic integrity.
Precisely. And this discussion really ties all the threads together, doesn't it? It reinforces the deep dive central theme. How these protection narratives, whether it's physical safety after a tragedy or protecting kids online or even protecting journalists, are so often used, intentionally or not, as a kind of Trojan horse.
A Trojan horse for what?
For increased control, increased surveillance, and ultimately a diminishment of true independence and freedom.
So let's try and bring it all together then. It's quite a journey we've taken. From the coordinated campaigns that swiftly follow tragedies, campaigns that often divert attention from specific causes toward broader societal blame, to the fear-mongering about online content used to justify sweeping digital surveillance, and even the subtle undermining of journalistic independence under the guise of protecting it, We've seen a consistent and frankly disturbing pattern laid out by our sources.
A pattern where societal anxieties and that desperate, understandable call for protection can pave the way for increased state and control and profound societal division.
It truly is that complex club sandwich of Satan, as our sources vividly put it, where fear and low energy are weaponized layer by layer to reshape our world, often without us fully realizing it until it's done.
It's a challenging observation, certainly, but a crucial one for you, the listener, to consider.
Absolutely. So, what does this all mean for you? It's the big question, isn't it? If we consistently outsource our safety, our agency, to external authorities, always demanding protection above all else, what is the ultimate cost? What's the cost to our freedom, to our individual responsibility, to our resilience?
Is the pursuit of absolute safety, managed by the state, a path to true well-being?
Or does it, as C.S. Lewis so presciently suggested all those years ago, lead to a different, more subtle kind of imprisonment, one where our spirits are weakened, our autonomy eroded, and we become easier to manage? It's a question worth pondering deeply.
And maybe, to leave you with something concrete to reflect on, consider that tweet of the week mentioned in our sources. It was Melger Meijers' AI photo satirizing authority overreach. It depicted police chasing a woman for harvesting vegetables in her own allotment garden.
Right, a humorous image, but with a sharp, unsettling point about control creeping into everyday life.
Exactly. And then perhaps contrast that with the ancient wisdom of Song 2. Why do the nations rage and the peoples plot in vain? The kings of the earth set themselves, and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord and against his anointed. He who sits in the heavens laughs, the Lord scoffs at them.
It continues. Now therefore, O kings, be wise, be warned, O rulers of the earth. Blessed are all who take refuge in him.
What does it mean for leaders, for rulers to forget their proper place? And maybe more importantly for us, what does it mean for us to seek refuge where true authority, true safety might actually lie?
Something to reflect on until our next deep dive.